On either side of the Grand River. That was taken without consent from the peoples, the neutral, the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe people, and then was returned to the First Nations occupying it in the Haldimand Tract, which has not been kept, and that's why we all, well, I live here today. And the Games Institute in the University of Waterloo is located here today. We do this because the Games Institute, one of our mission is to expand the understanding of equity, diversity, inclusion, and justice. And so we always want to remember and tell others where we come from and where other people have been before us. So with that, I acknowledge the enduring presence and traditional knowledge of the First Nations of Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and the neutral peoples with whom we share the Haldimand Tract land today. And with that, I will try to give justice and introduce our speaker for today. As I mentioned, Vik Agarwal is lead product manager at Zynga, which means that he's helping launch the next generation of games. And Vik, I hope you're going to tell us exactly what that means. But Vik has been working in the industry for over 7 years at multiple game studios, such as the Electronic Arts, DNA. I don't know what that means actually. So Vik, I'll have to ask you to do that. But also at Machine Zone and Amazon Games. And also he was working in the past on titles that have been grossing over $2 billion. So that's a lot of money. I don't think I can actually imagine that much money. Vik is very interested in what drives the player acquisition, engagement, retention, and in particular also monetization funnels. And it's, in his words, all about the players and providing them with an experience they truly value. Vik holds a master's degree in information security policy and management from Carnegie Mellon, and currently enjoys playing Clash Royale and Archer on mobile and Age of Empires 2 on PC. So with that, Vik, I will quickly just scroll through the participant list here just to tell you who we have here joining us today. And I can see that we have a number of our graduate students from different walks of life. We have some folks who are involved in human-computer interaction. Those are those that are recovering from the conference that just finished. And we also have some people from more of the humanities disciplines, English in particular, but not only, who are here to, I don't know, challenge you on some of those best grossing games because they have opinions, I'm pretty sure. Sure. We also have Neil Randall. He's the executive director of our institute. Hi, Neil. Thank you very much for waving. And I'm hoping that as we go along, some other people will join us as well. So some housekeeping notes. The meeting is being recorded for the benefit of those who couldn't join us. It will be posted to our YouTube channel that doesn't have a massive followership yet. But if you want to, subscribe, do that. Keep your microphones and cameras turned off for the part where Vik is presenting, unless obviously Vik tells you to do otherwise. But then afterwards in the Q&A session, please feel free to turn on your cameras and microphones and interact with the speaker freely. If you have questions during the talk, put them in the chat. Otherwise, you can ask them directly of the speaker in the Q&A session. And feel free to raise your virtual or real hands so that we can moderate the questions later on. Again, if you feel more comfortable just typing the questions into the chat, that's fine, and we'll bring them to Vik's attention. Be kind and considerate. Video communication can be challenging. We don't have all the normal nonverbal bodily cues that we normally get from other people. So benefit of doubt works really well, and please enjoy the talk and participate using the emoji or reactions, whatever they're called right now, because I'm always behind on the terminology there. And with that, Vik, go ahead. Talk to us about product management and analytics in the gaming industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Yeah, we're here to chat about PM and analytics today. I'll definitely keep it high level. So thank you for telling me about the audience. And if anybody has questions, I'm happy to go into more detail. One assumption I'm going to make before we start is that people are familiar with general gaming terms like FPS is first-person shooter, or what free-to-play games are. Those are some basics that I'm going to assume, everybody knows. If you don't, just raise a hand, and I'm happy to go into more detail about that as well. So to start off, we can talk a bit about the agenda for today. There we go. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit more about my journey, how I went from grad school into the gaming industry, and then my journey in the gaming industry. Then we'll talk a little bit about the basics in product management. What does the strategy side look like? What does the more technical analytics side look like? And then what are typical questions that a PM gets every day? And that's the more fun interactive section. And then at the end we'll have more than enough time for Q&A if you have some other questions that you like. So, diving right in, this is the name of my blog. It's called Geeks Mirage. And the reason I named it Geeks Mirage is, for a geek, people just assume, oh, you're just sitting there playing games all day. But for me, there's more than one side to a geek, hence the Mirage part. And this is actually pretty key for me because this is what I use to get into the gaming industry. And I'll talk a bit more about it in my journey. In on the blog, I also right at the top have this post called "How I Got My Dream Job," and that's like 10 pages long and goes into a lot of detail about how you change industries. How did I go from banking and consulting to gaming? So if you're in the mood for a tea time read for an hour, definitely go give that a look. Otherwise, I'll give you a quick snapshot of my journey right now. So this is essentially my life for the last 10 plus years. I did my undergraduate in India in engineering, and then I did my master's at CMU in Pittsburgh, and I studied computer security at the time. And when I was going through the technical course, I realized that I really enjoyed the number crunching side and looking at analytics. Therefore, I joined Deloitte for consulting because I got to achieve two goals there. One, to learn more about analytics, and the second was because it was consulting, I could work in a few different industries. So I didn't have to commit myself to working only in banking or only in retail or only in tech. I could go across industries and try something new. Well, that was the plan. But what happened, as everybody knows, that was around 2008, 2010. So around that time, people didn't want to travel a lot. People were considerate about their budget. So for a year, I worked only with clients in New York and only in the banking space. So even though I didn't get to achieve my dream of working with many different clients, I did get to work a lot in the analytics space. And when I got a role at Citi where they wanted me to double down on analytics, I'm like, you know what? I like analytics. I've been banking for a year. Let's go ahead and do that. And I was at Citibank for about 3 years. And that's when I realized that I really, really like analytics and I want to do more with this. But, in banking, I was working more in the B2B space, which is business to business. And I realized that I don't get to work with real people. I'm a people's person. I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy seeing what my users like and, what they would like change. And that's something I really miss. So I wanted to move to a B2C business. And at that time, I didn't really know what product management was or what program management was or project management was. I had no idea of the difference. So to keep a long story short, I spent about a year and a half talking to friends and interviewing at different companies. And if I remember the numbers correctly, I probably looked at over 20,000 job positions in that 1.5 years. I applied for probably a few thousand. I went event to event, gathering business cards and giving out my business cards, and probably got over 1,000 business cards at that point. And eventually, I think I gave about 100-ish interviews, and then I got my dream job at EA. So it was definitely a bit of a grind, but in the end, it was quite worth it for me because I broke into the gaming industry. I still remember my first day at EA when I walked into the halls and you see all the game trailers playing and you see the cool lights and people are like, hey, also you work here. I won't forget that day. That was pretty special. So from there, that's when my gaming journey started. So at EA, I was the lead analyst on Downgate, which was supposed to be a competitor for League of Legends. When EA decided to go a different way, I joined Pogo, where I worked on Flash games, and that's where I really got bitten by the monetization bug because I was handling the monetization portfolio. That's where I really learned about what the basics of product management are. And then I went and became a full-fledged product manager at DNA Games. DNA is a Japanese company that used to have offices both in the East and West. In the East, in Japan, it's a really big company, and in the West, they acquired a gaming company called NG and they were developing some mobile games there. So I worked on some games called Blood Brothers 2, which was in production, and we were running it live. I also worked on a new card game, which is supposed to compete with Hearthstone, called Storm. But after the Japanese company changed their strategy, they're like, you know what, we want to focus on the East. I'm like, okay, I spent a year being a product manager. I've run live events. I've looked at a lot of data. I really enjoy this. Now I want to run what is called live ops in game, which is running live events at scale. That's where I went to work at Machine Zone. And for those of you who aren't familiar with MZ, MZ was the leader in the space around 2015, 2016, and maybe even earlier. They had a couple of top grossing games. And when I say top grossing, like they were always top 5 in the App Store. They were mainly Game of War and Mobile Strike. And these are what are called 4x4 games, but they're essentially strategy games where you go in, you build your base, you attack other people, you join groups and clans, and that's how you have fun. So they were pretty amazing. I mean, if you look at publicly available data, these games gross over $1 billion a year. And I had the opportunity to work on both of them, which is pretty special. And before I changed from MZ, I worked on Final Fantasy as well, which was their foray into the East and making the same kind of games in the East side. So, covering so far, as you've seen, I learned how to be a product manager. I learned how to do analytics. I learned how to do live ops. But that's all the stuff that happens after you launch a game. And like, what happens before you launch a game? How do you start by designing a game? What is the process you go through in the first 3 to 6 months when you don't really know anything and you don't know which direction to go in? And that's why I joined Amazon Games, where they were building the next generation of games from scratch. And I really got to learn the early game process. How do you take an idea to the concept phase, and for concept to pre-production, production, and so on. So that was pretty fun. I did that for a year or two at Amazon. And then in my last year there, I worked at Twitch Prime, which was kind of fun, very different from what I've usually done. If you're not familiar with Twitch Prime, it's actually called Prime Gaming now. And in this, when you go to the Prime Gaming website, you can redeem free stuff for your favorite game just by connecting your Amazon account. If you play League of Legends or you play Hearthstone, you just go log in with your Amazon account and you get free stuff for your game. So it's a great idea for the consumers, and for the businesses, it's a new way for them to connect with gamers. So it's kind of a win-win. So it was a really fun place to work. And as you can see, I've been working in gaming for a long time. So I wanted to do something different. And that's where my path led me to Zynga today, where I work in the central product management team. So instead of working on one game title, I actually work across titles right now. So it's kind of the next step in my career, and it's been really fun so far. So any questions about what I've been doing? Otherwise, we could start, what is product management and what we're here for today. And thank you for that comment, Kat. I appreciate it. Okay, so moving on, what is product management? The classical definition says that, it's at the intersection of text, UX, which is user experience, and business. But that's, a high level definition. What does a product manager actually do? And that's what I want to focus on today. So in the gaming industry, because a PM is, across a vast number of industries. If you go to retail or you go to tech, whether you work at Facebook or Google, or you work at Amazon, or you work at Zynga, a PM does different things everywhere. But if you focus only on the games industry, there's 3 things I wanted to talk about. The first thing and the most important thing a PM focuses on is the strategy. So when you talk about games, right, it's about what game do we want to make? Why do we want to make this game? What's so special about this game? How long would it take to make a game like this? What would the profitability look like for a game like this? That's the strategic side. The second part is the execution. Okay, now that we've decided we want to make X kind of game, how many people would we need? What does the budget look like? How many engineers versus artists do we need? How long would it take in pre-production versus production versus soft launch? Really understanding the nuance and working with the other people on your team to figure out how you will bring that vision to implementation. And then the last part is leadership. And this is a really critical part of the role, because as a PM, not everybody in the studio reports to you. You have engineering, you have art, you have designers, you have marketing, you have legal, finance. There's so many different teams that you talk to, and all of them have their own priorities. So How do you work with them? How do you make sure everybody is working together to get to a common vision? When you need contracts from somebody in a week and they don't have the bandwidth, how do you chat with them and explain what your priorities are? That's where the leadership element comes in. And that's why you do have to be a people's person. You do have to have those leadership skills. Otherwise, you won't be able to get to the vision that you needed to get to. The second part is a question I get very often is, oh, okay, so a project manager, it's all the same thing, right? It's actually not. It's quite different. And I wanted to explain what the subtle differences were between each role. So for product management, I already explained, it's the strategic side, helping out with the execution and the leadership component of things. A project manager is the person who manages the execution only, and they are your key stakeholder in helping make the trains run on time. They're the Jira masters, they're the Scrum masters, they're the task masters. They make sure that everybody's getting to the work that they need to get to. If they have roadblocks, they investigate those roadblocks, they make sure people can get to that endpoint. You've heard of common terms like sprints and Jira and Scrum. That's what the expertise of a project manager is. And they're literally the right arm of a product manager, because I can set whatever vision I want, but if I don't work with my project manager to make sure that vision is executed and clear any roadblocks for them, we can't implement the product that we need to. So a project manager, or in gaming, it's also called a producer sometimes, they're one of your key stakeholders. A program manager is a term that's kind of bounced around, and it's used in many different purposes. But traditionally, a program manager manages different programs. So the idea is that if you think of programs or projects, they're managing more than one. So, for example, if you're developing 5 games at a studio, then a project manager, there would be a lead project manager for each game and a lead product manager for each game. But a program manager would be helping manage all 5 games. So they generally help communicate upwards. They help communicate to executive what the status is for each game, what the challenges are we going to come in on time, what is the strategic direction for the studio. They help manage all the programs together. In certain companies, people use it a little loosely. Like if you go to Microsoft, there a product manager, a project manager, and program manager is all called a program manager. So it is very company specific, but you can ask there. Right? Like when I spoke with some colleagues in Microsoft, I'm like, hey, so if I want to apply for a PM role or product manager role, what do I apply for? And they're like, well, it's called program manager here, but if you work on the Halo team, it would be different. Whereas if you work with Office team, it would be different. So it's really about understanding at each company, what do they mean by PM, and then which kind of PM are they talking about. And then the last one, which is slightly different, but people also call it PM sometimes, is it's actually called a PMM, or a product marketing manager. So a product marketing manager is actually somebody who works on brand or a performance marketing. Brand marketing is like TV ads, billboards, Target launches, getting your product to Walmart, making sure the ads are there, making sure the banners are there. They work a lot with like physical media and marketing. Performance marketing is something we're all super familiar with. Is the ads you see on the internet. It's the ad you get when you play a mobile game or when you're browsing Facebook. That's what they help manage. So these are the 4 different types of PMs that I know about. And when you double click on a game PM, right, they focus on something called AERM. And here's, where I'll take a quick pause. If anybody wants to chime in via the mic or chat, does anybody know what AERM stands for? Okay, I did leave a clue of that in my initial description, but yeah, AERN stands for Acquisition, Engagement, Retention, and Monetization. And it's a term that's used quite often in the gaming industry. The idea is this is what's called the full funnel in gaming. Acquisition is how people come into the game. Engagement is what they do in the game. Retention is whether they stay or not. And then overarching over all of it is, oh, do players pay in the game? So that's what is called the strategic funnel for game PMs. And as part of AERM, PMs generally focus on features and design. That, hey, I want to make a new battle pass. We need new levels. We need a new character. The actual parts that make up a game. And then the live operations. I have events in the game. I have sales. I have a loot box. I have a battle pass. How you actually run that and make money for the game. And we'll go a little bit more into detail in the examples. And then there's the second part, which is analytics. You can do a lot of stuff, but until you can measure it, figure out whether it's working or not, and then how you can improve upon it, you really can't get to the efficiencies you need to. And I have a full slide when we go into more of the detail about analytics. So, I'll take a quick pause here. If anybody has any questions about the different types of PMs or what gaming PMs do, I'm happy to take that. And I see there's a chat comment from Kaylee. I'll read that in the meantime as well. So yes, Kaylee. So what you're saying about the differences between product and program managers, and whether it was a company problem or a you problem, this is definitely a company thing. I'll give you an example. When I worked at Amazon, there are actually multiple types of PMs just within product managers. There's a product manager and a technical product manager. And the difference is that a product manager generally focuses on writing documents, and that is really, really important at Amazon and pretty unique. Where whenever you want to suggest something new, you write something called a 6-pager, where you're explaining the use case for what you're trying to do, and that's what you bring to a meeting. A lot of times, if you don't bring the written agenda to a meeting or a 6-pager, people just cancel the meeting because you're not prepared. So a product manager at Amazon is quite different. I was a technical product manager because I had a technical background, and I would help more in working with engineering. I would help do architecture reviews and things more on the technical side. And this is just for product managers. They have a program manager and a technical program manager. They have project managers. So it can get pretty nuanced, which is why I mentioned that it is quite company specific. So if you wind up going to the industry at some point, I would say don't assume that, oh, it's a product manager, it does the same thing everywhere. A product manager at, let's say, VMware, which does virtual machines and more technical things, would be very different than a product manager, let's say, at Walmart retail, which would focus more on business and strategy. So I hope that helps a little bit. Okay, now we're getting in.
Vik, sorry, if I may, I raised my hand, but I'm the moderator, so I can do whatever I want, really. So a question for you. I have not worked in the gaming industry, but I have worked as a project manager in my previous life. And I know from my own experience that there are sometimes, let's say, disagreements/conflicts between project managers and line managers, right, of teams that are actually working on things. I'm going to assume that with this variety of project managers and program product marketing managers and stuff, there's going to be potential for more of that. Can you speak a bit to that aspect as well?
Sure, absolutely. And you've actually hit on something very interesting that happens in the gaming industry, is who leads the game. Right? When you look at traditional AAA games, which are like, Assassin's Creed or Call of Duty, at least a few years ago, these are big AAA titles. They're made over, 5 to 7 years. They have huge teams of hundreds of people. And, you have, the people who've been there for decades in these games. But these games traditionally have never required product managers, because there is no live business component per se, right? What happens is you make a game, you maybe release a demo or a couple of trailers, and then you launch it, let's say on January 1st, and there's a big launch and everybody goes out and buys the game, and you get a couple of reviews, and then in 3 to 6 months time, you do a couple of sales, and instead of $60 it's $50, and then in a year it's $40, and then you do the flash sale, and then your game, you get the next one. So it's what's called a traditional waterfall model. And the reason I bring this up is that the lead in a AAA game is generally what's called the EP, or the executive producer, or think of it like the person above the lead producer. They're the one who set the vision. They're the ones who set the execution. And since this game is all execution based, because waterfall, you just go from pre-production to production, you launch it live, you make sure you fix all the bugs, and you're done. So that's what is led by a producer. Nowadays, there's a lot of games called free-to-play games, especially in the mobile industry, and those are traditionally product manager-led and not producer-led. And that is not to say there aren't producers. There's a bunch of producers on mobile games, and there are lead producers. And like I mentioned, you work hand in hand with them. But the vision for these is set by the product manager and not the producer. And the reason for this is because these are live games. So unlike a traditional AAA game where you're done after you launch it, in a mobile game or any free-to-play game, the real fun for me starts really after you launch the game. Yes, you've had it in the hands of consumers and soft launches and so on, but after you launch the game, that's when the real work begins. You're like, okay, I have a base game. Let's see how players react. Oh, they didn't like my daily dungeon feature. How do I improve upon that? Or maybe they didn't like my daily dungeons where I go in and get something every day. Maybe I should do a raid boss event where once a week everybody gets in and kills the monster and enjoys themselves. So that's where live operations comes in. And because a PM is the expert in live operations, generally they're the one who helm the game, which is why, getting back to your question, it comes down to who is setting the vision, right? If you're in a AAA game and the EP is setting the vision, then what the EP says goes, which is why, generally the producers have the last say. Whereas in free to play, it's generally the product managers, because they're looking at the numbers, they're looking at the data, they understand that, feature one versus feature two may take double the time to implement, but if you look at the return on investment, how much players may spend on this feature, it's much better, so let's implement this one. So hopefully that does answer your question, but the short version of that is it comes down to who is leading the vision for the game.
Thank you.
Sure. And I see a question from KOE. Do you find that the differences between expectation of PM from company to company creates difficulty for talent to switch? Correct. Okay, so you were asking about how do PM switch company to company if it's different between different companies? And that's a great point, right? Like, as somebody who's worked in gaming for a while, and as you've seen, I've been at a few different companies, and I have considered moving to the tech industry. It's just my, gaming enthusiasm keeps pulling me back in. But it is difficult, right? So I'll give you an example. If somebody interviews at Amazon, they obviously care, like, and especially Amazon Game Studios where I work, right? They do care about your gaming experience, but Amazon has something called leadership principles that they really care about and imbibe, in their culture. But the interviews are all LP based, so you actually have to study those. You have to understand those. You have to rejigger how you think so that you can present yourself in the best way. If you go to Facebook or Google, and I'm sure there's enough resources about that out there, right? Their interviews are very case based and they're very traditional product based, where they'll say, oh, let's assume you're the head of product at Airbnb. What would your top priorities be? Or, oh, Airbnb stopped working and your user base declined by half. What would you do in that case? They're very classical problems that you would face as a product manager. And what would you do there? So, there you have to study about product structures and product design and how you break down problems, which is very different from what a product manager does day to day. So I think this is a reason why people tend to stick to industries, and that's why people say, oh, for me to change industry, it's so difficult because I don't understand that business. Now, I will say something that, the execution differs in each industry, but once you get to a more senior level, like a director or a VP, then it's kind of like running the business, not so much about the nuances. So, you could move a little more fluidly between gaming and tech because they're all technical businesses at the end. But yes, there is a certain nuance, which is why, people tend to stay in their industry. So, for example, if I went to Apple tomorrow, I wouldn't know really what I could do there because they don't have a gaming product. They have the App Store, and I could maybe work on the App Store, but they don't run games. So it is different and difficult to switch from different verticals, which is why people do tend to stay in their vertical. And even within their vertical, there's so much variety, right? If I work at Zynga, for example, which is the leader in mobile games, it's very different from working at, let's say, Ubisoft, where they're the leaders in AAA gaming, and they're entering mobile games, but it's a newish arena for them. So I would say it is difficult, which is why people generally tend to stick to their line. But it's not impossible to switch. It's just like applying for a completely different job. So you need to spend a couple of months studying for it, learning more about it, talking to more people. So hopefully that helps. Great. Okay, moving on. Now we're getting to the interactive session. So hopefully, you guys respond a little bit because that's what makes this fun. So, putting on your gaming caps a little bit, right? Hopefully you guys have all heard of battle royales, which have been in the news for the last 5 years, with the most popular ones being Fortnite and PUBG. So this is a question that everybody in the gaming industry talks about, and it was talked about for the last 5 years. So, I want to use a historical example that everybody's been talking about. which is that the battle royale market is a red ocean. And by red ocean, I mean it's like, a lot of sharks in there. There's a lot of blood in the water with people trying to compete. And there's two, three, big successes. Obviously, PUBG and Fortnite. Call of Duty has done really well with Warzone. And then, there's Apex and a couple of other games as well, which are also doing pretty well. But there's a bunch of smaller titles that tried to make a battle royale and didn't really do well. So the question is that today in 2021, if you were making a new game, would you consider making a battle royale? Yes or no? And then depending on whether you say yes or no, why yes or no? And you don't have to go through all the data I have on the screen, but the idea is, if you see, Overwatch came out in 2016 and it was a first person shooter that added some battle royale modes in there, where Fortnite came out in 17, Apex came out in 2019. So people come out over the years. The business model keeps changing. Some are premium, some are free to play, some are on mobile, some are not. The monthly active users for them ranges pretty significantly. You can see Destiny is 3.2. You can see, Fortnite is 50 million. The revenue changes. Fortnite is $1 billion. Some others are only a few hundred million. So all of this changes. So keeping this in mind, would you make a new battle royale? Yes or no? Yeah, feel free to use your microphone. Feel free to use chat. I'm happy to chat more about things. So Agatha says no. Why would you not make one?
I don't know. Maybe it's because I don't play those things, but it seems that the entry here to the market is fairly expensive, considering the competition here.
Yeah, that's a great point, right? Sometimes when there are incumbent behemoths in the industry, you're like, can I really compete with this? Fortnite makes a couple $1 billion, right? I have a small studio, maybe $10 million, a few, a little more than that. Can I really compete at that scale? That's a great thing to think about. What else? Anybody else have any thoughts on whether you'll make a BR or not? See, now I know why Ali left. Otherwise, I would have picked on him. Yes, I see Neil waving.
Hi. It's a really good question, and one of the one of the things I'm coming back to here is the way we see the games industry working generally, which is to say that it's probably less risky, I would suggest, to do a new battle royale
Mhm,
or a sequel of something else
mhm.
than it is to start on something that's completely innovative and new, in a
Yeah.
sense.
Mhm,
And I guess one of the questions I have, this is not really answering your question, but do you encounter situations where you're looking at the potential for new IP, a new game, a new game idea that
mhm.
you simply either just simply can't commit to because it's new and nobody will buy something that's brand new, is what seems to be the case. So that seems cynical, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do. And the thing is, so this is a great point you made, right? This is exactly the opposite of what Agatha was saying, that, oh, it's very difficult to get into an industry where there are titans already there. On the flip side, it's a tried and tested game design concept. People will love it because it is popular, right? As long as you can get the user base for it. Doing something new is always risky, right? And people say it's the hardest to be the first one through the wall. And you're absolutely right. I have been in so many concept meetings where you've just killed stuff saying, you know what, I don't think the market is there for it, right? Like, for example, today, if you think about virtual reality game, right, would you make a game for the Oculus or not, right? On one hand, you'll be right at the front of new generation of game development. On the other hand, is there really a market for it, right? You really have the Gear VR and you have the Oculus, but they're really small markets as compared to, let's say, a mobile game. So if you're an investor, would you invest $20 million in a new VR game because in the future it will become big and it's an early investment? Or do you want to invest into a mobile game which is hot, but there's tons of competition in it? So it's one of those business cases that you have to really, money apart, you also have to find somebody who believes in it and cares about it, right? So I may be like, for example, when I joined EA, I wanted to work on Downgate because I love playing mobile games. I love playing League of Legends. I would play it all weekend, every night. They have an esports component that's really amazing. So I chose to work on that because I love it. So I think in gaming, like 80% of it is logical, but 20% of it is passion and vision. Where do you think the industry is going, and what kind of business do you want to be in, short term or long term? And based on that, you change what you want to do.
Thanks.
Sure. Yeah. And by the way, if anybody else has a comment, feel free to not raise your hand. Just type it out or say something, because there's so many people attending. I can't flip through everybody. But for this example, I'll go ahead and chat about the answer. And I have 2 more questions coming. So get ready to talk a little bit. So moving on from this. Okay. So the first thing is, when you look at games for comparison, I always remove the couple of top titles in there because they're the runaway successes. They're the ones who've done exceptionally well. So for example, I've heard this so many times. People are like, oh, Fortnite made $4 billion. If I launch a new game and I just make 10% of that, I'll make $400 million. That's amazing, right? Like, it doesn't work that way. You just can't say, oh, I'll be a percentage smaller and it'll work, because they're the exception to the rule, right? There's League of Legends in the mobile space. There's Hearthstone in the card game space. There was Game of War and Clash Royale, and a lot of other top grossing games in the mobile space, a few years ago. So you can't say, oh, I see Clash Royale, they make $1 billion a year. Any new mobile game should make at least 100 million, right? Not really, right? They're a seasoned studio with a lot of experts there. So it doesn't really work that way. And it's funny, but I've actually heard this statement many, many times, that people are trying to make new games. So this is, something you don't want to step into, saying, oh, I just see somebody else doing really well, I'll make that much. What you do is learn from them. What makes Fortnite so successful? What makes Apex so successful? What can I do that helps me learn from the successes, but also be a little different? And that's the second part, right? What makes Fortnite so popular? Right? Versus, let's say, PUBG. Like, PUBG is quite popular as well, but Fortnite is just, that much more. It's like, I won't say it's a couple times more popular. And what's the reason for that? And first, actually, it comes down to art style. Like, people don't think a ton about art, but if you think about Fortnite, which is very accessible, it's something younger people can play, versus PUBG, which is more set in the desert with guns like Call of Duty, and something like shooting people, versus the more cartoony, accessible art style of Fortnite. That's a really big difference, right? And if you take the example of Call of Duty, right, there are hardcore gamers who spend thousands of dollars on Call of Duty, whereas in Fortnite, you may have teenagers or young adults who may spend only $10, but you'll get 20 of them versus one core gamer who spend a lot of money. So that's the kind of thing product managers think about. Am I aiming for the long tail where I get lots of people who spend a little bit? Or am I aiming for the core user base where I won't get so many people, but there'll be big spenders and big engagers and will play my game all the time? And the last part is, not only is it competitive, but Fortnite also became really viral among teens, and everybody knows about virality. Everybody wants to be the next influencer, and there's so much of that going around. But for Fortnite, they were kind of at the beginning of this, which is why when it became viral, that led to a lot of success for them, and that's why they are the leaders that they are today. Just to contrast that, I wanted to talk a little bit about Apex Legends. For people who don't know Apex, it's a battle royale made by EA, and it came as a really big surprise to the industry because the studio that made it was traditionally known for making AAA games like Titanfall and Titanfall 2. So nobody really expected them to make a battle royale. And the story was that when they were working on the next Titanfall, and when Fortnite and PUBG became popular, because they already had a base shooting game, they kind of pivoted into free to play and decided to make Apex. Now, the interesting part about their marketing strategy was that as opposed to the traditional strategy, which is, for multiple weeks, you start dropping teaser trailers, and then you drop a full length trailer, and then you get a couple of streamers to, show it off. And then, you launch some YouTube videos, and then eventually you launch the game, right? Instead of that, they just announced it one fine day. And what happened, I remember this was February, I forget which year, a few years ago, that I just got up and I saw in the news, EA is making a battle royale, play it today. And I'm like, what? EA is making one? I have worked there. I have friends there. Like, I've never even heard about this in the industry. And what they did was quite innovative. They went out and got like 10 or 20 big streamers, really popular streamers, and they said, why don't you stream our game for the next week or so, and we'll have limited access to the game, and then after a week everybody will have access. So it was a really unique marketing strategy, and everybody was in the industry was talking about EA and Apex. What is this new thing? I want to play it. How does it compare to Fortnite and PUBG? And because of that, when they launched a week later, people are actually able to get access to it. I think their basic DAU, daily active users, was over like 50 million or some crazy number. They got so many people playing the game just because of unique marketing strategy. So sometimes it's not only about the game, it's about how you get it to users, it's about how you announce it, and it's just about, can you create the excitement around the game? So that's something to consider as well. Okay, so we've talked a lot about this interactive session. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about numbers and what kind of data do PMs look like. So there's a lot of text there. Don't worry about it. I'll go through it one by one. So the first thing that PMs look at is what I call the basic metrics. So this is things that you just always measure because you need to know the health of the game. The basic ones are DAU or daily active users. You can have weekly active users or monthly active users. You have daily revenue, which is ARPDAU, which stands for average revenue per daily active user. So that's something you use to measure how much money did I make today. You can have average revenue per user, ARPU, average revenue per paying user. That after all the payers, how much do they pay on average? Is it $5 or $100? There's a lot of basic metrics that you can measure. Then there are game metrics, right? How many people completed a particular level? How many people bought a particular character? How many people are in queue for your game? How many people jump out of your game? The basic game metrics that you want to monitor and understand how your game is doing. After the basic metrics, from the PM side or the game side, you get into analytics and analysis that, okay, I see what's happening in my game, but I want to figure out who's makes up the majority of my spenders, right? Is it, lots of people spending $5, or is it just a couple of people spending $100? So traditionally in game parlance, people say there are minnows, which are less than $5, dolphins, which are 5 to 100, and then whales, which are over 100. Now, this terminology is slowly getting phased out because people don't like the term whale, and it's not nice to call people that. It's more like high, medium, and low spenders. But traditionally, these were the definitions that were used. And then you also look at player age, right? Is the person spending $100? Did he join yesterday, or did he join a year ago? So you look at things like spend velocity. How quickly are they spending? How quickly are they engaging? How quickly do they get to the last level? Things like that. Then there's the analytical side, right? Where you do deep dives, where I'm like, oh, I see a lot of people buying this new thing, but they're not playing it. Why is that? And this actually happened to me at a particular studio. And we realized that we had so much hype around the new character. They were melee, they could jump on people, they could instantly kill them, and it looked really cool. So our hype really worked, and people loved to buy it. But something we didn't underscore, and that wasn't really apparent from the trailers, was that this was a high skill character. It wasn't easy to play. You couldn't just be like click and kill, then you're done. Right? It was, you had to dance around them, you had to damage them a little by little. So it required, kind of you to have played the game a lot more. Whereas people who are new to the game thought, oh, I can just quickly do this. And they realized that it's really hard to play. So a lot of people bought the character and didn't really play it. So we realized that was causing negative player sentiment. So then we added like a difficulty meter to the game where you could say, hey, this champion is difficult to play or easy to play. And then, people are like, oh, I'm new. Let me not pick a difficult champion to play. So because even though you sold a lot more, you don't want people to be unhappy. And that is the key thing for me as a PM, that yes, you focus on the business, but in the end, it's all about the players. And if your players are unhappy with something that you do, then you're not really doing a good job. Moving on to the rest of the analytics side, I'll go a little faster about this. So then there is something called machine learning, and you can do crazy deep dives there. Like, for example, when you're trying to evaluate player skill, like people do in chess, you have player ratings. If I am a new player, how do I figure out what the right rating is, right? In chess, it's easy. You start playing tournaments, you get an ELO rating, and then you move up the ladder. But in gaming, I'm coming to play a first-person shooter. I'm an expert. I played Counter-Strike all my life. So I know how to play games. So I shouldn't start at the newbie level. I should start at a pro level. But how does the game know that? So how do you do that mathematically? How do you analyze, oh, this person had a kill to death ratio of 10 kills with 1 death and 1 assist. So they're a really good player. Let's give them harder people to compete against. How do you figure out stuff like that? It's something I work with data scientists on. The second part, we already talked about the ARM funnel. We also look at it, at each individual part of that, acquisition. How many people are coming into my game? What country are they coming in from? How often do they come in from that country? Engagement, are they playing level 5? Are they playing the new daily bonus feature? Are they playing the raid boss feature? Retention, do they come in and stay for one day and then don't come back for a week? Or, are regular players coming in at least for the first 30 days? And then monetization, we've already spoken a ton about. And then when I introduce new features, we do something called A/B testing. That I'm designing a new starter bundle. I don't know in the warrior starter bundle whether I should get 100 food or 100 wood. Right? How do I know? I don't know which one will perform better. Right? I think it may be food, but I can't say for sure. So that's when you run what are called A/B tests. Like I may take 10% of all my population. So if I have 100 people in the game, I take 10 of them. And then to 5 people, I do a food offer. And to 5 people, I do a wood offer. And then I see how many people bought that. And then when you do this on a live game, you won't have 100 people, you'll have 1,000,000 people. So you'll have, about 10, you'll have about 100,000 get the food and 100,000 get the word. And you'll be like, okay, now I understand what people are buying. And now let me do this for the whole population, but I see food is more popular. So let's do that. So that's how you run A/B tests. And then the different kind of job roles that you'll see in analytics, there is a marketing analyst. They evaluate, what I was talking about earlier, performance marketing. What ads are you showing? Where are you showing them? Are you showing ads to the right people? Are you paying and are you not overpaying for them? Like you could spend $100 showing an ad to a person and be like, wait, I spent $100 on the ad, but the person only spent $10 in a year in this game. That wasn't very good return on investment. So you know what? I need to change that. Versus game analysts who actually look at the game. Oh, I have this weapon that does 23 damage and I see everybody's buying this weapon. That's not a good thing because nobody's using anything else. What if I change it to 21 damage? Will that change anything? So you really look at the nuances of games, characters, weapons, whatever game it is, and understand that. And then the last part are data scientists. These are the machine learning experts. I already gave you a few examples around ELO and some deep dive analysis. That's what they help out with. They're generally statistical geniuses and they're really, really good at what they do. So I really enjoy partnering with them. So I'll take a quick pause again before we end up, and I have one or two more examples and then we're good to go. So are there any questions about analytics?
If I can, I have a question. Hi, Vik. Again,
Sure.
it's Agatha. So again, I don't have any experience in the gaming industry, but in my past lives, I worked for an art organization, and I don't know if you know much about art organizations, but they do not have those $2 billion budgets usually, like local orchestras and theaters and stuff like that. However, what I remember from back then, and this brought to mind when you were talking about segmentation. In the kind of non-gaming arts, so mostly performing arts, most of the support for the activities of those organizations come from the smallest kind of players in the segment. So the individuals who buy tickets or buy the lower level memberships and things like that. So is that different in games? Do you know where most of the revenue sits in terms of the segments that you've mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing is, like you said, this kind of concept of segmentation, it really is across industries, right? So let's just taking gaming, for example, right? Let's take two games. Let's just take the one that I was talking about, Fortnite versus Call of Duty, right? Fortnite, because it is a team-based game and their battle passes are only $10, right? I would assume that, the average revenue per player is probably, $5, $10, $15, right? Not something very high. Whereas if you go to Call of Duty, people sometimes spend $60 buying the game. They're core gamer, they could spend $100, $200. Like in certain mobile games, you'll see people spend tens of thousands of dollars. So it really depends on what kind of game it is, right? It's the same way, like, let me think of a good real world example, right? So segmentation is everywhere, right? You go to and buy a fridge, right? People are a refrigerator, and people are like, okay, we want to buy a fridge, right? There's one for $1,000, one for $2,000, one for $5,000. So when you do price segmentation, we'll be like, oh, you know what? $1,000 basic, 2,000 sounds like a good spot. It seems a little more premium, but not that much more. So, and I don't want to spend the 5,000 because I don't have that much money. And the idea is that they don't actually want you to spend the 5,000. They want you to spend the 2,000, but the 5,000 is there just to create, oh, I don't want the expensive one. So to answer your question, it just comes down to what kind of business are people in, right? Like when it comes to, let's say, art, right? There are people who love buying, street art. Like I love buying street art for $50 or $100, but you can also buy original paintings for a few $1,000s. And sometimes you do both, right? You may have 10 pieces of street art, but one really nice piece of original art that you bought for $5,000. So I would say it's not hard and fast as to what people do. It just depends on what kind of business you're in. If that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Well, now we're down to the last two questions. So hopefully I can get some more interaction this time. This is a question I have gotten so many times, it's not even funny. But your manager comes and tells you, let's say Tuesday morning, and your manager comes and say, hey, Vik, the revenue fell by 50% overnight. Look into it now. What do you do? What kind of metrics would you look like? What kind of data would you look like? What would you look at in your game, saying, oh, why am I not getting revenue? It was fine yesterday. Yeah, great point, Kelly. Did the payment processor break, right? Oh, are people trying to pay and can they just not pay because the payment processor broken? Is PayPal not working? Is iOS not working? Like, what's the issue? That's a great one. What else could it be? Like, feel free to spitball, throw ideas out, because there's like 20 different answers for this. New financial regulation in a geo region. So it could be that, hey, the US is a really big, 80% of your users come from US, and suddenly they're like, oh, to pay, you need to do an extra CAPTCHA, or you need to add your phone number. Or, like, for example, what happened a few years ago, you can't use a swipe credit card, you need a chip credit card, and people didn't have that anymore. In India, there was demonetization, and you could not use, suddenly everybody switched to digital currency, you could swipe your card. So maybe that couldn't be it. Oh, negative media coverage, right? Yesterday, people read that you're not privacy first, or there's something not nice that happened at your company. I don't want to buy this game. I don't support their business practice. Or a player said something and you didn't like that. You know what? I'm not going to play this game anymore. That's a great idea. So now more technical about the game, right? Until now, we were talking about kind of the ecosystem and what people are doing. Now, coming to the actual game, is there a server issue? Can it be as simple as that? Oh, my server went down. Maybe there's a power outage that you didn't know about where your servers are, because maybe your server is not at the office. Game access issues, right? Maybe your game requires a login, and believe me, this is so common, right? Like sometimes Game Center on iOS breaks, and even though I want to play the game, I literally can't log in because the game doesn't allow me to. So that's really, really common. And yeah, or you have a login system in your game and suddenly you have to wipe the password because there was a hack, or there's just the access is broken, so you can't do that. Oh, a world event, right? Coronavirus happened, and for a week, people were like, I don't have the time to play games. I have real life stuff to get to. So yeah, these are all great ideas, right? I'll give you a really old story I read about a studio in the early 2010s. This was a company that was really, good at game analytics, and they were doing certain kinds of mobile games. And they found that every Sunday from noon to 2, their DAU would just drop by half. And they're like, why do people stop playing at the same time every week? And they could not figure it out. They checked their servers, they checked their game, they checked their logins, they checked, what is happening in the company, and they just couldn't figure it out. And then, a couple months later, they're like, you know what, it is a thing, it's a weird anomaly, let's just forget it. And then a couple of months later, they had a new hire who joined, and they're like, hey, I'm not going to be available this Sunday 12 to 2. They're like, wait, that's the same spot. What are you doing? He's like, no, I watch soccer at that time every week. And then it turned out it's just, one of the countries where most of the DAU comes in, there's a sporting event at the same time. And that's where the DAU fell all the time. But just nobody thought to correlate real life with what's happening in the game. So there can be many different reasons why this happens. And I noticed that, you found out somebody, the company is a bad actor, and that's why somebody doesn't play the game. There's a new release. Oh, new releases is one of the big reasons why games break. You want to make sure that people come over properly. There's no issue with people transferring to the new release. So yeah, don't get me started on that, John. That's a big problem in itself. So let me show you a couple of situations I have seen. And what as PMs, what we try and do is like have a mental checklist. We start at the top and keep getting more granular from there. So the first question is the revenue still falling? Right? Is it a problem that happened tonight and it's done with and I can investigate it peacefully? Or is it still falling and I need to act urgently and fix it? Right? The second part is, okay, if whether it's falling or not, the thing is the game working? Right? Which comes back to the server and some similar stuff or game access. Are people able to play the game? The third part is your user base still the same? Right? Revenue is half. Is your DAU half as well? Then it's obvious, right? Less people, less money. Or it could be the same number of people playing, but just your payers are not playing. So you have to look at whether the user base is fine. Then what do people buy? They buy sales, right? They buy items in the store. What did you release in the last 24 hours? Was it something really bad? Or maybe they just, was an access issue to the sale, right? That's what you do. Then I already mentioned active payers. And maybe there's equal number of people in the game, just the payers are not playing. And it's the people who don't pay that are playing. Then it could be everything is fine. It's just that the sale you released recently, or for some reason people are not buying the $100 pack, they're buying the $20 pack, and therefore the average payer revenue is lower, or cohorted, that means the segmented cohorts that you make are lower. Right? User acquisition, somebody mentioned this, right? Where are the people coming from? Are there any drops in the install funnel that, oh, I used to do Facebook ad and Facebook went down, therefore my user acquisition from Europe went down, which is why I have lesser new people in the game, therefore lesser new player revenue, right? And the last one, which was something very interesting, and somebody told me at another talk, is maybe everything is fine and the analytics system is just not reporting correctly, right? And it's something honestly I didn't even think of, and I'm like, wow, that why did I think of that? Like it would just be bad analytics, right? And then I got a lot of new ideas from here as well, right? New regulations in a different region, the news, what's happening outside. So there can be a lot of different reasons, but the idea behind what I shared was, you want to go about it methodically, and then you want to start with the most immediate. How urgent is it? Is this falling? Is the game working? And then you keep breaking down the problem from there. And believe me, I have done this at least 3 times in a major revenue drop and many times in small revenue drops. So it's like a fun investigation for PMs, but when the time is critical, it's not very fun at that time. Moving on, this is the last question I have. This is a little bit more detailed. So Fortnite has this very unique system called a battle pass, and this was very controversial when it first came out. And the concept about this is that if you see here at the top, here is the free tier. Is that, let's assume every time you play 10 matches, you win a tier. Just assuming that. Therefore, in this screenshot, you can see if you get 70 matches, you'll get to tier number 7. I'm assuming that I think there are 13 pages of this, so there's like 50 or 60 tiers. But if you pay, I think it's $10, then you can actually get all the cool stuff at the bottom. You can see it's all legendary stuff in the orange. It's green stuff, which is the rare stuff, and you get character stuff. Really cool stuff. So this was extremely innovative in the industry because it was something that had never been done before, and people were confused as to whether this was for monetization, was this for engagement, is it a good or a bad thing to give people, like, just tell them what the rewards are and hey, you can get it if you play. So people weren't really sure. So if anybody is familiar with battle passes, or just after listening to me, like, does this concept sound good? Does it sound bad? Right? Is this consumer first? Is this not? Is this business first? Right? What do you think? Oh, and I noticed Ali had a question. Do you investigate positive trends too? Absolutely, right? Like, I'll give you an example for Fortnite again, because it seems like we're talking about Fortnite today. One fine day, when you looked at Twitch data for, I think it's a March 2019, if I'm not wrong, maybe 18 or 20, suddenly in one day, their number of Fortnite viewers went up by 50%. And 50% of one of your top games on Twitch is a really big deal. So why did that happen? It turned out there was this random streamer called Ninja who tweeted at this basketball player, and they decided to play Fortnite together. And instead of getting 5 or 10,000 viewers or 20,000, which a typical pro streamer gets, he got 600,000 viewers. And that kind of broke Twitch overnight. It took Fortnite to another level and really made it popular. So yes, you do investigate positive trends. So coming back to our battle pass, what do you guys think about battle passes? If you've heard of them or you listen to me explain these, what do you think? Do you think it's helpful? Yes, so they're very common now. Fortnite, Destiny, Apex, sharing rewards is a way to encourage regular players. Ding ding, that's a really important point. And there's option to buy tiers so that they can be a good thing for the business as well. Great point. I'm going to talk about that. Let's put a pin in that for a second. Anything else that you guys see? It sounds like it's really common now in 21, but when it came out in 19, like nobody had heard of it. It was so innovative. Like when I saw this, I'm like, man, I wish I was the PM that came up with this. This is like industry changing stuff. I'll give it 30 seconds for other people to chime in. Otherwise, I'll talk about what we've seen about battle passes and why they're popular and what the pro cons are. Okay, while others are typing up their responses, I'll go ahead. So what is a battle pass for? Is it for conversion, which is taking people from non-payers and making them a payer? Is it for monetization, making a lot of money? Or is it a good way to get engagement that, hey, if you play a little more, you get something cool? So Fortnite has a really large user base, right? If you take random numbers or semi-random numbers, they have 50 million MAU, monthly active users, and only 1% of them buy a battle pass at $10. That's $5 million a month and $60 million a year. Right now, given that Fortnite makes $1 billion a year, it's many more people than that. Obviously, some people buy in the store and stuff, but they're probably making a few $100 million from the battle pass. Right? They also do something innovative, or I would say innovative, something different and interesting, where to buy a battle pass, you need 950 V-Bucks. V-Bucks is their currency like dollars. But for $10, which is the amount you want to spend to get a battle pass, you get 1,000 V-Bucks. So what happens? You have 50 V-Bucks sitting in your account annoying you. Hey, I have something, but you can't do anything with 50 V-Bucks. I think in the store, like everything is at least a few hundred V-Bucks. And that's a interesting way to get you to be like, hey, you know what? I'll just top up for $2 more if that's allowed, and then get to a few hundred. Let me buy this small thing. So that's a way to leave some currency in your wallet so that people buy more stuff. The second thing is something that Fortnite does well in its battle pass is that it only sells vanity, not pay to win. What that means is that they don't sell you a gun that is more powerful, in which case, if I pay the $10, I get this badass gun and I can go kill everybody, and then, hey, I'm the winner, versus people who don't pay, just lose. Right? Everybody has an equal chance to win. It's only your skill that matters, and they only sell vanity. It's different ways for you to look different in the game, but it doesn't actually affect the game. Right? That's not true in most mobile games, right? Any mobile game that you can take, I won't say any, most mobile games you can take, you take a racing game, you take Clash Royale, you take Archero, right? You get new characters, you get new weapons, you get new levels where you can get better loot. So it's always going to be pay to win, but Fortnite is not. And what do they sell? They sell character skins. That's a way to look different. They sell emotes. Your character says something different. They sell llamas, which is just good looking. So, they sell you stuff that's fun, but it's not required at all to play the game or doesn't give you any incentives in the game. The another part is the make your money back scheme. When you actually go through a battle pass, you pay 950 V-Bucks for it, and they say, oh, if you finish the battle pass, you get 1,300 V-Bucks from completion. So you actually make money, right? How does that work out for the business if you're just giving away money? Well, if you look into the design a little bit, what happens is that the extra V-Bucks are actually given right at the end of the battle pass, and it's not 10 games per tier. It could be that for your first 10 or 20 tiers, you only need to play a game or two, in each tier. But towards the end, you need to play 50 games a tier. So it doesn't scale linearly. It's a little bit exponential. And the last 10 may take you 80% of your time to complete, but that's where the really expensive stuff and the extra V-Bucks are. And honestly, if you play the few hundred games that are required, you are a hyper engaged user, and they don't mind giving you the extra couple of bucks because you deserve that reward, and you are some of the best players in that game, so they're fine. But it also creates aspirational value that for the people who couldn't get that, they're like, oh man, I lost out on the free money, I'll do it next time. So that's the kind of thing that Epic thought about when they designed this battle pass system. That's kind of industry standard now. But if you like reading about stuff like this, there are two websites that PMs refer to a lot in the industry. One is called deconstructoroffun.com. And what they do is that they literally deconstruct games and gaming trends. What do battle passes do? Are they good for the industry? Let's look at examples of battle passes. Oh, this new mobile game came out. Let's analyze it and break it down. Let's look at the AERM features and learn more about that. And then if you're more interested in gaming news, there's a digest called GG Digest. It's by ex-PMs across the industry. They send this, I believe, once a week. And they will send you all the gaming news. They'll send you some articles from WSJ and some other private bloggers and just show you what's happening in the industry. So as a PM, I read both of these very often. And if you're interested, I would say definitely go ahead and you check these out. I think that is it from my side. If you have additional questions, my LinkedIn is there. Feel free to reach out and connect with me. And now, I'll take some questions, and I see there's some detail in chat. I'll answer those until then. So I answered Lillian's comment about common. It allows free-to-play players to feel rewarded. Absolutely, right? Generally, free players never got anything in a game, and they just had to pay, and they didn't like that, and they felt pinched. So with the battle pass, F2P players also feel rewarded. Robert says it depends on implementation. If they're focused on getting concrete rewards without gambling, then they're friendly. If they give tickets to a gambling system, then it's predatory, right? This is something the entire industry is talking about loot boxes and odd-based loot boxes. So the industry has already moved towards disclosing those odds. So a lot of time when you go to the loot boxes, press that small I or star in the corner, you can see what the drop rates are. Oh wait, I only have a 0.5% chance to get the cool thing. I don't want to do this. Oh, I have a 10% chance. Okay, fine, I'll take a chance. So yes, but generally, I think the concept of battle passes was more about what Linear was saying about engagement and giving people a thing to do and feel rewarded for what you do, versus actually providing more gambling reward and so on. The whole point of it was to be static, but as the industries develop, people are trying out different models. Cat is talking about Valorant, and to get any cool game content, it costs a lot of money. A skin is 30-40 bucks, a battle pass is 10 bucks in community content, and it says some free lovely rewards. It's the best of both worlds, right? And yeah, so that's the thing, right? The battle pass is the basic thing. It allows free players to feel rewarded. It allows low players to get a lot of cool stuff too. And for the studio, right, like you can't imagine how expensive it is to make a skin. Like probably it costs tens of thousands of dollars to make a single animated skin. So you need to make up that revenue, and then depending on the kind of game, right? If it's Call of Duty and Valorant, which are core games, then you price it higher because not too many people will buy it. And if for Fortnite, you'll price it maybe at $3 because lots of people will buy it at a cheap price. So yeah, great points. Any other questions from anybody?
At this point, I would encourage you to maybe Vik, you can stop sharing your screen so we can actually see faces, and I'll ask people to turn on their cameras and mics, and this is where you get to interact. I did get a couple of questions on the side, Vik, as you were talking. So if nobody wants to start, I will start with a couple of those. So one question that came up to me was, for a gaming startup with, say, 2 people, at what point do the roles, project manager, producer, etc., begin to appear? When does it become necessary to split the team and possibly recruit others?
Sure. So I would say when it's 2 people, right, that's so it depends on what your studio plan is as well. Are you planning to have an indie studio and have 2 or 3 people and make the game and publish it? In that, the model is a little different than, hey, we're starting with 2 people to come to the game concept, but we eventually want to get to a studio of 50 people or 70 people. So it's a little different. I'll give you both answers. Right? If you're going to be a small studio with a couple of people, then like any other startup, you're going to wear multiple hats. Right? You're going to have a technical person who's going to code the game, and you're going to have a creative person that does the art for the game. It could be that one person does both technical and creative, and the other person helps with the management and marketing and so on. So I think if it's only a couple of founders, you really want to delineate your roles with, hey, I'm going to do this and you're going to do this. Figure out what you do, and then you work together in harmony trying to figure it out. If you're planning to scale, then what happens is at the beginning, you want to figure out what do you want to make, why do you want to make it, what is the budget with it, what is your ramp up plan, what do you see yourself doing for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and then you slowly start hiring. So generally, like a PM could be the first person, or they could be the third or fourth person. Generally, you want the vision setting person early in the game so that you can make the game that way. But like I said, it depends on how many people you think you'll have eventually. And there's a couple of great documentaries on this, by the way. If, like, some are more positive, some are a little more challenging, like Indie Game, the movie, and so on. But it was very interesting seeing how many challenges indie people go through. So really fun to watch.
I think that's also, I mean, that goes beyond the gaming industry. Any startup, right, regardless of industry, will go through that. So people are jack of all trades at first, and then things change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyone else has a question?
Yes, I noticed Ali had a question about feature PMs versus roadmap PMs versus ops PMs. So you're right? Depending on the scale of the studio, you could have many different types, right? I've done all of these as part of a single role, and I've done these specifically as well. So let's say there's a game studio, you have 50 to 70 people, you have 2 or 3 PMs. As the lead PM, I would be like, okay, I am organizing the roadmap. I want to figure out what goes on there. I work with the producer to execute on it, but I also work with my 2 junior PMs to define what features are they working on. One person could do multiplayer, one could do single player, one could do new features, one could do existing features, and then they'll be running live events, which is the operations. Right. Then I've also done it in the more specialized capacity. Like when I was in Machine Zone, I was a live ops PM. I didn't really affect what goes on the roadmap, and I worked on a few features here and there, but my job was to run the game, right? Run the sales, make sure the sales go out on time, make sure you're getting the revenue from that, make sure you're introducing new features at the right rate. If you're not, you go back to the feature PM and say, hey, I don't think this was well designed, or I think this should come a week later because we don't want to introduce stuff too fast. So it really depends on the scale of the game. And like I was saying in the previous thing, like in that team, we had 10 operation PM alone, whereas on most other games, you have 3 PMs total. So, it really depends on the size and scale. When you're doing a $1 billion game, you'll have 20, 30 PMs on there. When you're doing a $100 million game, you may have 5 PMs on there. So it depends on the scale.
Thank you. Other questions coming from the audience?
Mm-hmm.
If not, I will go to those that were submitted to me. Doesn't look like we have anyone chatting. So another question I got was, from a leadership standpoint, how often do you find yourself restating the vision, mission, goals of the game to the team that you're working with? Does the day-to-day attending to nitty-gritty elements of the game cause people to lose the perspective of the overall strategy?
Yeah, so great point, right? This is something we talk about quite often, right? I would say it is important to probably talk about it weekly at the very least, about what your goal is and what you're trying to do. It's also important to remember why you set this vision and whether it changes or not, right? So what happens at the beginning of the game, since we talked about battle royale, I'll use the same example. We are like, okay, it is November 2019, right? There've been a couple of battle royales in the States. They're doing really well. We also want to make a battle royale because we think it's going to be a rip-roaring success. We have a $100 million budget and we're going to do this, right? You start developing it. You're like, this is our goal, battle royale success, battle royale success. Now it's November 2020 and you're a year into production. You're going to launch in 3 or 4 months. And then Apex Legends came on and Call of Duty Warzone came on. And you're like, wow, there's a lot of games out there. I thought we would differentiate ourselves by being the ultimate core, like Call of Duty style battle royale. But now there's already a Call of Duty style battle royale. What do we do now? How do we pivot? Do we change our goal, or do we keep believing because we think we can do this? So it's not only important to talk often about your goals, it's also important to be open to changing and pivoting as the industry changes. The gaming industry changes so fast. It changes month to month, as opposed to, let's say the tech industry, which is now more mature and changes more in years. So you want to be nimble enough to change, but you also want to keep the original vision, because I have also seen a lot of what's called analysis paralysis, where you just keep analyzing stuff and you're, oh, I found this thing, let's do this. Oh, wait, this is the new thing, let's do that. And you keep pivoting and you can never launch. So the most important thing is to know what's happening in the market, be able to pivot, and then just launch, get it in the hands of real people and get feedback and grow, versus keeping it in-house for years and years until you can launch.
So what you're saying is that nothing is perfect until it's actually perfect.
I'm saying nothing is perfect until you give it to real people, and real people will tell you how bad it is, and then you can improve it from there.
Right, absolutely. We have a question from Shiva here in the chat.
Yes.
I am working as a PM now, and if I want to break into gaming, and I want to break into gaming as a PM, what and how can I do it?
Absolutely, right? So it depends. I mean, feel free to chat with me via voice as well, Shiva, if you want to give more details. But if you're working as a PM already, then you already have the basic skills that talk about our strategy, execution, leadership, and so on. So that's a given in this case. Then what you need to understand is the gaming industry. I'm going to assume you're working in the tech industry, just for assumption, and it is a little different. So if you came and interviewed, let's say with me, my question would be, how much do you know about the industry versus just being a gamer, right? I played a lot of games, but until I joined the industry, I didn't know about all this analytics stuff. I didn't know about things like MAU and DAU, and I didn't know any of this, right? So how much do you know about the business itself, right? And maybe depending on what your skill set is, maybe you want to join slightly differently. Maybe even though you're a PM in a different industry, they focus a lot of your tasks on project management. So you join as a producer, you learn more about PM in the industry, and then switch, right? I joined as an analyst because I was better at the technical stuff, and then switch. And sometimes you have the right experience, right? Let's say you work at Walmart Labs. That's a really popular company. They're doing a lot of retail. They're like, hey, we do offers and sales every day. I'm really familiar with this ecosystem, and I'm like, okay, I need a kind of sales live ops PM. You already do that. It's very simple. Just come on over, and you're into games. That's important. So I will say being passionate about games and being into games is required for kind of 2/3 of the PM roles, because you need to live and breathe the industry. You need to want to play games, right? Like I literally play 5 mobile games a week, and I've been doing that for 5 to 7 years. So think of the number of games I have on my phone, because you just want to see what are other people doing, have that curiosity as a PM.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, so I got it actually. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Shiva. So I will give people one more moment to think about a question. I have one last here that was submitted to me earlier. And it goes back to the, it's never a perfect thing. Do you ever reach the point in the game's development where you realize that the game just isn't working? If yes, and assuming it's not just a simple fix, how do we reorient the team and their incentives?
Absolutely. So I'll skip the incentive part for now, because most places outside of AAA studios, you don't have an incentive for launching a game, like game profits and stuff. It's just you're a normal salaried person. But the concept that you said is really important, right? How do you realize that something is wrong with your game, and how do you fix it? And how do you go about getting people to actually believe in that you can fix it? So there's 2 places that this happens, and 2 reasons why this happens. One is because you didn't get user feedback early enough, or there are actually some technical issues and there's something wrong, and then you need to pivot. So on the technical side, it could be your game is too big. Let's talk about mobile. You're like, oh, I wanted 3D characters, and I wanted lots of animation. You're like, wait, the latest phones can't really support that, right? Like if I want to play Need for Speed on my phone, I don't know if iPhones can really support all the rendering and the cool clouds and the drag racing. I don't know if phones are good enough for that yet, right? Because you'll have to make a specific mobile game for that. The second part, like we talked about, is user data, and that is the most common issue, because people start doing AAA style of waterfall development, where you're like, develop, launch, and oops, oh, that didn't work. What do we do now? Right? Versus mobile development, where you honestly want to go out when you're in the alpha stage, which means that you just have a couple of levels, a couple of characters, and you just want to launch it in one country. Let's say I launch it in the Philippines, where it's not that expensive to do user acquisition in terms of ads, or New Zealand, which is really popular because you have people who are used to playing good games, not good games, they're used to playing they're used to playing and spending in mobile games. So depending on what you want to test, you launch in different countries, and once you do that, you start getting real data. There is no substitute for real data, because as a PM, I can think, oh yes, I know the industry, this is what will work, but users will tell you and players will tell you what they like. So until you test it, you won't know. So the way to figure it out is launch it and get user feedback. And if you don't, like you said, then it fails. And if it fails, then what you have to do is, it's generally a management conversation about, we spent X million dollars in development so far, we need to spend Y million dollars to get it back up to track. Do we believe in it enough or not? Or would we rather spend that Y million dollars in a new project and, kind of let this one naturally, keep working until it doesn't anymore while we invest on a new one? So it's looking at all of that. But most of the time, if you get user data early enough, you can help avoid some of these pitfalls.
Thank you. On behalf of the person who asked that question, we have one more question from Robert in the chat, and I think that will be the last one because we're coming up to the end time for our event, and it flew by. Robert is asking, and this goes back to some of the conversation in the chat earlier about, the same thing may be seen as predatory, it can be seen as community building, right? Or, it could become gambling or something. So Robert is asking, at what levels in companies do ethical discussions occur around making sure that the company and games contribute to being a good actor? So making sure that games continue to be accepted and provide a safe and fun option for people's recreation.
Absolutely. So I think there are two times that this happens, right? And two levels at which this happens. One is at the studio level, right? When you start a game, I'll be honest, I don't think any studio starts with the fact, I want to make a game to make money. Right? Everybody starts with, I want to make a game because I think it's a really fun game and I believe people will enjoy it. Right? Now, yes, there is a business component to it, but you start with a creative vision. Making a game is like making a movie, right? You don't want to make the next movie because it will make $1 billion. Like sometimes you do, but you really do it because you're passionate about the product itself. So that's where it starts, and that's where people put their ethos into it. Like, hey, I believe the industry is tending towards no loot boxes, so let's not get into that. I don't want any negative sentiment to our game. Let's just keep it vanity only, right? Even though vanity can have loot boxes, right? Or I think battle passes is the way to go. We'll get enough people in the game. We don't want to get to a high price IAP because people won't enjoy it. Or I'm making a niche game. I know the people who like it will pay for it. Everybody else doesn't have to. So that's when you're setting the vision for the game. The second happens at a company level, right? What does your company believe in, right? No company say, okay, we believe in money and we want to do it. I would say all gaming companies are all about the player. But at the company level, how much is the company getting down to, hey, no loot boxes for the company, or no battle passes for the company, or we want to make only Apple premium game where people don't have to pay anything. They just pay Apple and we get a cut out of that. And, we're not getting involved in the money side at all. So it really depends on what kind of game you want to make as a company and then what your studio wants to make. But this is something we all talk about a lot because in the end, we all like playing games and we want to make games because it's fun. So I think that's why we talk a lot about good actors and how we can do good for the players. Right? It doesn't always come across because players are like, oh my God, you put in the new sale, it's so bad, I don't like your game. But that's because we didn't do a good job at communicating what we wanted to communicate. So in the end, if your players are happy, you've done a good job. That's the key thing.
Thank you very much. Robert is saying, thanks, great info. And I think that's a sentiment for everybody here. This was a very fascinating talk, Vik. Thank you very much to the insights, the underbelly, if you will, of the gaming industry. So I don't think anyone at the GI, and perhaps I'm behind, but I don't think anyone is doing actual active research into that side of the industry. So this is certainly a really, really interesting point for us to explore, and hopefully we'll start off some new conversations. I will ask you all to virtually or not join me in thanking our speaker. Thank you very much, Vik, for joining us today. Yay. And this is a new thing for me, all those active reactions. And we hope to see you at some point at our actual space, which is right behind me. It looks really, really drab because there's no people there, but we promise there's lots of. So perhaps if you visit Waterloo or thereabouts, we will get to welcome you at the GI in a physical sense. In the meantime, thank you very much for joining us, everyone, today.